아파트, 아파트. While the 아파트 phenomenon set off by BLACKPINK's Rosé and Bruno Mars shows no signs of slowing down yet, Rosé recently released her long-awaited first solo studio album, Rosie. In today's Kulture Issue, we will delve into the K-pop artist's unique music style depicted in the album and talk a little bit about K-pop infused with different genres. And for that, we now invite Claire Marie Lim, music technologist, artist, and faculty member at Berklee College of Music, who connects to us from New York. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Claire.
Hi, Soa. Hi, Walter. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So first of all, it was last week on Friday, December 6th, when Rosé released Rosie, her first full-length album as a solo artist. So what's your assessment of this album?
That's such a great question, Soa. When I first listened to the album, I really just couldn't help but enjoy it. It was so natural and wonderful to listen to. And I've been listening to Rosé for a while. I remember listening to her very first single, On the Ground, which was released in 2021. And it was so gratifying for me as someone who's been listening to a lot of K-pop over the years. It's been almost 20 years for me now. To hear an artist have this trajectory. On the Ground had very much, rock influences there, and you can hear a lot of the same influences in Rosie as a full album, but also lots of development too, where you have more genres that are being incorporated into the music. And really listening through the album from start to finish for all 12 tracks, it was such a journey to be taken on.
Same here. I have been listening throughout the weekend, all the 12 tracks, just like you, Claire. Now, Rosé's 아파트, featuring Bruno Mars, was a rock-based cross-genre song. So do you see Rosé's album as an extension of the K-pop star's experiment of combining such different music style?
Oh, absolutely. And I totally love it. I think one thing that's really special about Rosé is that she's able to kind of take her own influences that she's passionate about and incorporate that into her music. Which is why even though I've really listened to a lot of BLACKPINK's discography, and Rosé being a member of BLACKPINK, it's really wonderful for me to see her solo work, because I think having a solo project really lets these individual artists within a group speak out a lot more about their own styles and the types of genres that they gravitate a bit more towards, and also get a chance to write a little bit more too. I think sometimes in K-pop, especially when you're in a group, not everyone gets the opportunity to contribute to the creation of compositions within an album or within an EP, but she has written so many of the songs or co-written them on her album. So that's really wonderful from an artistic perspective as well.
Yes, I remember she did an interview saying how much she took part of it and how emotional she was when she was writing some of the songs. But how do you think the endeavor paid off musically?
Oh, it totally paid off. I think it was absolutely, if there was any, question about whether incorporating rock into a main single of a K-pop artist was risky, I think it totally paid off. I recently was visiting Seoul, actually, a couple of weeks ago, and everywhere on the streets, you would hear 아파트 being played. And even, over here in New York, where I'm based, or, in the United States, where I teach, all of my students who are doing anything related to songwriting all know the song, even those who aren't necessarily Korean or who don't necessarily listen regularly to K-pop. They know 아파트, so it's definitely become quite a phenomenon.
And Claire, I just recently was in Singapore, and actually, really, the first song that I heard in a taxi or a Grab, I should say, was actually 아파트. So I was really surprised. Claire, is infusing different genres into Korean pop music part of what makes actually K-pop appealing to the global audience, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question, Soa. And I would say yes, very much so. One thing that we're experiencing a lot of now, especially I would say in the last good decade or so, is that non-Korean speakers or, folks who might not be familiar with even Korean culture are getting into it because of K-pop. And I do think that a lot of these genre blending artists are responsible for that. So for example, even thinking a little bit about artists like New Jeans or Stray Kids, incorporating not really common types of electronic pop styles into their music, but pulling from international subgenres of electronic music into their content. And in this case, Rosé kind of going for a bit more of a rock vibe, but also collaborating with artists who are a little bit out of the traditional BLACKPINK electronic pop genre, Bruno Mars in this case. That's a really great move for expanding this artist's audience.
Then how do you see K-pop's approach to experimenting with different genres and styles impacting the global music market?
Yeah, that's a great question, Walter. I do think that honestly, things will just keep expanding from here. One thing that I've been really happy to see, really, since you mentioned the expansion of the global market, is that K-pop has been continuing to grow. Because I remember when I first started listening to K-pop, and I would sometimes be, kind of the odd one out listening to K-pop amongst, my social circle or amongst friends or teachers or even my parents. So they were kind of taken aback at first. But now that people have started listening so much to K-pop and also spreading it to their own friends, we've really got this great network of K-pop appreciators all spreading across the globe, through dance, through songs, of course, just through K-pop culture in general, which I think is great.
Now, sometimes existing music pieces serve as a huge inspiration in producing a new song. For instance, we've got Korean traditional 국악 music or classical music that may be inserted into modern-day songs. But we would like to know, how does this work in terms of copyright issues?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Well, I think one thing to keep in mind about copyright as well is that it does differ a little bit depending on the country that you're in. So for example, the copyright law in the United States would be different from South Korean copyright law. But I do think one kind of additional thing to consider, which might not be thought of off the bat by a lot of folks who sample pieces, is that you've got the copyright for the composition, but you also have the copyright for the recording of the music, right? So for example, if someone were to record a specific rendition of a 국악 song, they would need to be accountable for that recording. So in some cases, you really do need to kind of walk a fine line about getting licenses, getting the proper permissions for you to use a song in your music. And that's actually a little of what happened in 아파트. I'm not sure if a lot of folks realize, but there's an interpolation, we call it, of a segment of music from a tune called Mickey, which was released in 1991. So that was something that I think they probably had to get a lot of clearances for, especially because, the original composers are listed as composers in 아파트 as well. So they did their homework over there.
I think it can be a quite a complex issue, but yet I think it's worth it.
Yeah, and as a professional who has been following and enjoying K-pop for a long time, what are your thoughts on the changes and achievements of K-pop's global influence?
Yeah, I'm definitely really proud of how far K-pop has come, if I could be, proud of it. I think one thing that I've been really impressed with, especially in the last couple of years, which follows a little bit through with, Rosé's album too, is the way that K-pop artists have been collaborating with non-K-pop artists. I think that's a really great way of being able to, like I said just now, expand the reach of a song. But it's also great for artists themselves to have the experience of working with other folks. When we think about how artists are always looking to improve themselves and, get even better at their craft, I always think that working with other people who you might not be too familiar with is a really great way of doing that. So I'm really happy with the progress that K-pop has made.
And now, Claire, speaking as an expert and specifically from the point of view of a music technologist and musician, are there any elements that you think would help K-pop continue to grow further in the future?
Oh, absolutely. One that comes to mind almost immediately is the idea of experimentation, which we briefly spoke about just now too. But I've really found that K-pop songs have a lot of success when they keep trying to push the envelope. The K-pop has now developed such a great fan base, a core group of listeners who are, fans of music, fans of groups, artists that they support. And it's a really great way for artists to then have the confidence to experiment with new genres. For example, one of my favorite tunes on Rosé's album, which maybe is a little bit of the lesser known ones, is Drinks or Coffee, which is the track that's right before 아파트 in the track list. And it has some really wonderful Afrobeats influences, which I found so interesting when I was listening to it. I played the song, and the moment that drum groove started coming on, I was really impressed. And I think that if other artists do the same thing too, we'll definitely find a lot of success in the continued growth of K-pop.
So experimenting, I guess, is the key word today. Thank you very much, Claire, for your insights today.
Thank you, Claire.
Great, thank you so much for having me.
And thank you, Walter, as always.
Thank
we'll
you,
see you back later in the week.
See you later.